Yet, Hans, how many brothers you have. So how many is that? Is that 9 with Robbie? 10 with an adopted brother. And you're about halfway.
I'm the fourth from the oldest.
From the oldest.
Yeah, so I guess close to the middle.
And you can stand up, Nathan. This is Hans's oldest brother. So good to be together. And the one thing that, like, it's a little true of pastoring, but it's also pretty true of being a dad, is when you sign up to be a dad, like, like there's a lot of good days, and we're thankful for those, but we're a dad on our hard days, and the days that we're not at our best, we're still a dad. And it's interesting how it's all mixed together. And even as Father keeps growing us, we also are dads. And I think James can tell you the last couple of years that there's been things that were big, overwhelming, and bigger than him. And I found that it's kind of interesting. I've watched my daughters, different youth. You hit 12, 14, 16, 18, and it's identity stuff, finding who you are, knowing who you are, and being okay with who you are. It is real stuff. I've watched quite a few men as their kids kind of leave home, grow, different identity stuff. You hit 50s, and it's just interesting how we have to just, again, know who we are, know who, it's good stuff. But James, I'm going to get out of the way. Father God, we just pray that you would use James here, just bless him. God, thank you for this time. Just pray for your anointing. We pray, Jesus, in your name, amen.
Good morning, and welcome to all of you. It's really is good to be back in Jesup. It's been a little bit since I've been here. I think probably the last time was for Mary's grad. So I don't know, when was that? Was that 2 years ago? Or so it's just I don't know. I'm sure you can all identify with that. It's kind of, for one thing, it's hard to get away from home, and then as you get children and stuff, that they get scattered, and then there's more places to go. So we've been through Georgia a number of times the last while, but we're just on our way to Florida. So I guess you can, Kara's partly to blame for us not being able to stop here. So, but it is good to, just to, I don't know, to see family and friends, see some, new people I don't recognize, but just, we got some good connections here, and I guess that's what makes a place, maybe it makes a place home, or makes us want to come to somewhere. I mean, I think Jesup is a nice enough place, but if it wasn't for having, some connections here, probably would drive on through and, maybe wouldn't spend any time here. I'm not sure, but this morning, Willie, read some from the Psalms and also from the Proverbs, and I'm really glad for, I don't know, just especially the Psalms. I can identify with that. I mean, as you see David and some of the other writers of the Psalms, that they, as they tried to put words to their what they felt inside, the whether it was worship, whether they tried to express their gratefulness and just worship to God, or maybe it was the struggle they were going through as they tried to put words to those. And And in the Proverbs, we get, there's many, we read through there, there's just points of wisdom. We wish we could recall them at any time. So often we read through and, man, I forgot that. I wish I could have remembered that at this time. But, again, I love to read through the Psalms and other places. But I am really glad that God in his wisdom included stories in the Bible. And I think one of the things is in the story, sometimes we don't have a lot of detail, but we have these stories of people, and we see them in real life as they lived, as they faced what they faced in their time. And I think, for me, it seems like it's maybe sometimes easier to recall or sometimes easier to remember when there's a story involved. This morning, I'd like to turn to Nehemiah. I wasn't thinking of Father's Day when, I guess when Hans had first asked me, I don't know, it's probably a month ago or so, and I wasn't thinking of Father's Day, so I've not really, this morning my message wasn't geared that direction, but turn to Nehemiah 1. I'm going to use that for a passage this morning, Nehemiah 1, and I think I'll read the entire chapter there. Nehemiah 1, beginning in verse 1. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. It came to pass in the month of Chislev in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan, the citadel, that Hananiah, one of my brethren, came with men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the survivors who are left from the captivity in the province are there in great distress and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem is also broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. So it was, when I heard these words, that I sat down and wept and mourned for many days. I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven, and I said, I pray, Lord, God of heaven, O great and awesome God, you who keep your covenant and mercy with those who love you and observe your commandments. Please let your ear be attentive and your eyes open, that you may hear the prayer of your servant, which I pray before you now, day and night, for the children of Israel, your servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Both my father's house and I have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you, and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, nor the ordinances which you commanded your servant Moses. Remember, I pray, the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though some of you were cast out to the farthest part of the heavens, yet I will gather them from there and bring them to the place which I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. Now these are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, I pray, please let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who desire to fear your name. And let your servant prosper this day, I pray, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. For I was the king's cupbearer. I'm sure you probably heard the expression, let the main thing be the main thing, or something to that effect. I'm not sure if that's the exact quote or not, but I'm sure you probably heard that expression, and I believe that's good advice. But sometimes where the rub comes in, we wonder, what is the main thing? We, as we're living life, it's busy. It seems just so often we're just barely keeping our heads above the water. There's so many things to do and stuff. And sometimes we look back and we realize we missed some of the main things. If I were to ask you this morning, when I mentioned the book of Nehemiah, and if I would ask you, what is the main thing in the book of Nehemiah? And I imagine among your answers probably would pretty likely would include the building of the wall in Jerusalem. And that was a notable, and not just noticeable, I mean, that was an amazing feat to be able to, I believe it was in 52 days, to be able to build that wall together. And there'd be a lot of lessons that we could learn from that story. That just lessons in working together and having a common goal. It's amazing sometimes what can, I guess just how easy sometimes a difficult task can become. I imagine Hans and Rochelle can attest to that some yesterday. I mean, there was a lot of things to pull together for the wedding, and just a lot of things that need done. But when people step in and each person does their part, all of a sudden it's done. And so there's a lot of things that we could we can be inspired. We can learn from that story. We can learn lessons about leadership and so on. There's some little, I guess, I'm not going to get into go to that part of the story, but there's just some things as I was reading through Nehemiah again, just a few little bits of information that it kind of gets my start thinking about them and imagining what it was, why some of this stuff was mentioned, and I guess I'll just in passing here just mention a couple of them. In chapter 3, when it goes through and it names the different people, this person repaired this part of the wall, and this person and so on. In chapter 3, verse 20, it says, Baruch repaired carefully. And I've wondered for a long time when I see that it's not, I guess it's not in all translations. I think if you have an ESV, it doesn't even, it doesn't have any, doesn't mention that. But in the King James, I think it uses the word carefully. In the NIV, it says zealously. In Young's literal translation, it uses the word hastened. And I've wondered why, it seemed like, everybody was in a hurry. They were working hard to get this wall done. And why does he, in his recording, what does he notice about this Baruch that he makes that note that he repaired carefully? And maybe that's something you can go on and think about that. Back to the chapter 1 here, just begin. Who was Nehemiah? A lot of times, in these stories, we don't have a lot of background, and I think Nehemiah here, we don't. He doesn't take a lot of time to introduce himself, or it's not like in Ezra when Ezra introduces himself and he traces his lineage back to, I believe, all the way back to Aaron, the high priest, and that was something very important to the Jewish people to be able to trace their lineage. But here in Nehemiah, he just, we know he's the son of Hakali, and he has a brother Hanani. His name means the Lord comforts. he's living in Shushan or Susa, which was the winter residence of the Persian kings. And the Persian emperor at this time was the world power. And Susa, I guess, this would be in modern day Iran, which that's kind of currently in the news quite a bit, that country. But this was also where Daniel was when he saw the vision, at least one of his visions, the vision of the rams and the goats. It's recorded in Daniel 8. It was the home of Esther and Mordecai. I'm sure all of you know that story well. That's where they lived. He seems to have been a man of quite a bit of financial means. In chapter 5, when he's recording the time there in Jerusalem, seems like there was quite a few people that he fed every day, and it says that he didn't take a salary that would have been his to claim as the governor, the governor there of that region at that time. He didn't take that. He must have used his own funds to feed these people, and so he didn't draw a salary. We also know he was a cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. And he almost mentions this kind of at the end, just kind of as a footnote. I was the king's cupbearer, as if that wasn't that much. And maybe sometimes we read it that way, that he was just the king's cupbearer. That was just kind of a tag on there, and it didn't mean that much. But the cupbearer was much more than somebody who just brought wine to the king. According to the Holman's Bible Dictionary, they give this definition of the cupbearer: it was a high-ranking official in the court of ancient Near Eastern kings. The cupbearer was responsible for serving wine at the king's table and protecting the king from poisoning. The cupbearer was often taken into the king's confidence and had no small influence on the king's decision. The cupbearers would have been, I think they would have been an important part of the security detail of these kings, because poisoning was a legitimate concern for these kings had enemies back then, and that would have been a way to, if they could have gotten, somehow got connections to somebody in the kitchen, or and somehow got poison into the king's food or drink, and been able to kill the king. There would have been people that would have done that, and so the cupbearer, and it sounds like I would think it wasn't just one person that was in that, but they were a trusted inner circle that provided protection from those kind of things. I'm sure that there was also, there was armed security and so on, but these cupbearers were part of that security detail. Probably something like our Secret Service. I remember quite a number of years ago, we had in our small town, when Bush was campaigning for president, he came to Cambridge, to our little town, and I just remember the security that was there. I mean, there was men around with big guns, and they were obvious. I mean, you could see them, and they were people that we wouldn't have wanted to mess with, I'm sure. But I'm sure there was many other people in the crowd, and some of them you could pick out. I mean, if you looked around, but there was many in the crowd that were just kind of mingled in there, but Secret Service that we're watching, and I think that's kind of what the cupbearers position was. Cupbearers were mentioned a number of times in the Bible. When Joseph was in the Egyptian prison, he meets the king's cupbearer and the king's baker. They were thrown into the same prison that he was in. In 1 Kings 10, when the Queen of Sheba came to meet Solomon, and it said, she was awed by just the tremendous wealth and everything that Solomon had. And among those things that it mentions that she was awed by, it says in verse 5 in chapter 10, it says, the Queen of Sheba was awed by Solomon's food, the seating of his officials, attending servants, his cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he made at the temple. Another thing we notice here about Nehemiah, and I don't know how much time we spend thinking about it, but Nehemiah is living nearly 1,000 miles from Jerusalem, and I guess that was one thing that kind of grabbed my attention. And this time, as I was reading through the book, why is he here? And I don't think it's a question I can answer. We can just pass it off. Well, God, that was God's plan, and but we don't really know. But here he's a man. He seems like he's very concerned about his people and his people in Jerusalem, but he's not there, and he would have been in the same time period with Ezra. Ezra had led a group of people back to work on rebuilding Jerusalem, and it seems like their time overlapped. Like Ezra would have been in Jerusalem at the same time. So Nehemiah, I don't know if he would have had opportunity to go back to Jerusalem. I don't know what contributed to him not being there, but he's not. He's living in Susa instead. But again, like I mentioned, he was a man that was deeply concerned about his people, about others, and even though Jerusalem was far away, what happened there touched him, and I think that's maybe one of the things. Often distance kind of insulates us from needs. If our neighbor's house burns down, we're there. It touches us. But if a house burns and it's, say, 1,000 miles away, oh yeah, that's, we're not happy that it happened, but it doesn't really touch us that much. But Nehemiah he had a depth and he realized the things that happened in Jerusalem to his people there touched him in a deep way. Even though he was connected, he was secure in his position, and often again that kind of insulates us from needs around us when we're when we have our needs met. Sometimes we can so easily then not be concerned about others around us. And I don't think this wasn't just a shallow emotional feeling. He didn't just hear this report and then it was something that when he heard of the condition in Jerusalem, he was concerned. It moved him to action. See, it didn't write down the verse there, but it says that he sat down, he wept, he mourned, he fasted, and he prayed. The next little bit here, I'd like to just look at a few things from Nehemiah's prayer. His prayer begins with recognizing who God is. And I think that's, well, just think it's important. I know that that's important for us to recognize who God is. I think, I mean, this might be taking it a little bit out of context, but in Psalm 50, verse 21, we have this phrase. It says, "Thou thoughtest that I was altogether such an one as thyself." That's from the King James Version. In the ESV, it says, "You thought I was one like yourself." And I wonder, I mean, we know, we talk about how great God is, and we believe that. Like it's just the other, last week we had Bible school at our church there, and the one night, one of the questions on the worksheet was a true or false question, and the students were supposed to answer. And one of the questions was God, it wasn't a question. It was a statement, and they were supposed to decide if it was true or false. And the statement was, God changes every 10 years. And it was an easy answer. I mean, everybody, there was no hesitation, no argument. Everybody said, that's false. God doesn't change. And, we believe that. But I wonder, so often do we, and there is a part of us that we can't wrap our minds around a God who doesn't change, who is always the same God that Nehemiah was praying to here. He's exactly the same today. He hasn't learned anything. He's known, he knows, I can imagine him here holding time from the beginning to the end. That's, it's that easy for him. He can see everything. And for us, I mean, part of us, we just, it's not, maybe we believe it, but we in our humanity, we can't wrap our minds around that. But that's who, Nehemiah begins his prayer with recognizing who God is. And I think it is good for us to sit and contemplate that sometimes, even though we can't, we know that, that we're not going to be able to comprehend who God is. It's good for us to sit and think about that. And I think so, that cannot, or that will affect how we view life. If you go back to the story of Job, I mean, we see, I love reading through Job. I can't say that I understand, those men were so gifted in words and so eloquently, argued their position. But we see, Job's three friends there, they're arguing their point. They, seems like overall, I mean, they were sure that Job had sinned. That was the reason, and God was punishing him. And Job comes back and very eloquently defends himself. No, I'm upright. I haven't sinned. But then when we come to the end, towards the end of Job, the book of Job, when God speaks to him, and we see the change in Job. He has nothing to, he doesn't go back to defending himself. He when he gets a glimpse, another glimpse of who God is, that changes his perspective. And I think that's so good for us to spend time thinking about who God is. And that's where Nehemiah started. Another point that he confessed sin, the sins of his people. And maybe in some ways that would be the easier part. We can look around and we can confess, man, our country is just, there's some terrible things happening, and but he doesn't stop there. He confesses the sins of his father's house. He includes his father's house and his own sins. And I wonder, so often we find ourselves praying more like the Pharisee, and then maybe more like the Pharisee than the tax collector in the account that Jesus gave us there, when the Pharisee was praying, God, I thank you that I'm not like that man over there. And I wonder if that maybe we wouldn't dare say those words, but is that kind of where we're coming from? God, I'm glad I'm not like that person. But Nehemiah enters in. He claims, confesses his own sins, identifies with his people, even though maybe in some ways he hadn't participated personally in some of, hadn't sinned against God in ways that maybe some of his people had, but he identified with his people. Another point I noticed there, he's still, even though he comes to God, he recognizes who God is, he's still aware of their present desperate need of God's help. And I don't know, maybe sometimes when we can kind of, maybe in some ways just lightly give it to God. We got a problem, well, it's God's problem now, we just give it to him. And I think that, I don't know, I think we like Gene mentioned, this is real life. We face real things every day. And in spite of giving, when we can give it to God, and there is strength and in naming our needs and giving them to God. But we still live in that realization that we still have needs that need met right now. And to live with that realization that God is, that we still desperately need him every day. I also see Nehemiah here, he's aware of the promises that God has made to his people, and he names some of those. God, this is what you said to your servant in time past, that you would restore us. And he's aware of those promises, and he reminds God, and not that God would have forgotten, but I think it shows, often when we pray, it's the, it becomes, it changes us, not, it's not like God would have forgotten his promises. But it's good for us to be aware of the promises that God has given us. And I think isn't that there'd be many more points here, I'm sure, in Nehemiah's prayer that we could pull out and but isn't that the main thing? In the book of Nehemiah here was a man that came to God with his needs. Nehemiah could have, it seems like he was a man of, that he was gifted. Obviously, there must have been, there were some things that caught somebody's attention that he was able to become the king's cupbearer, to become part of that inner circle. He was, most likely a gifted person, and he had connections, and we can, maybe we could spend, that's why God used him. But I think it was because Nehemiah was a man who recognized his need for God. And I think that's maybe the main thing in Nehemiah. And for us to live in the light of who God is, for us to live in that recognition, even though we can't fully grasp who he is, but to live every day that we're serving a God who is great beyond anything that we can comprehend. For us to live with the awareness of how we have failed him. For us to live with the hope of his promises. And to live with the awareness that our ability to successfully meet the challenges in front of us lies with him. I'd like to close with just reading a psalm, and I'm sure there'd be many psalms that we could read, but this was one that I just happened to read the other morning, and I thought it fit here, and I'll end with this psalm, Psalm 62. It says, "Truly my soul silently waits for God. From him comes my salvation. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be greatly moved. How long will you attack a man? You shall be slain, all of you. Like a leaning wall and a tottering fence, they only consult to cast him down from his high position. They delight in lies. They bless with their mouth, but they curse inwardly. My soul waits silently for God alone, for my expectation is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be moved. In God is my salvation and my glory. The rock of my strength and my refuge is in God. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts before him. God is a refuge for us. Surely men of low degree are a vapor. Men of high degree are a lie. If they are weighed in the scales, they are altogether lighter than vapor. Do not trust in oppression, nor vainly hope in robbery. If riches increase, do not set your heart on them. God has spoken once, twice I have heard this, that power belongs to God. Also to you, O Lord, belongs mercy, for you render to each one according to his work." Turn this one back to Gene.
Pretty neat there. So Nehemiah would have been about 140 years after probably grandpa would have been taken as a slave. So if it's your grandpa, I didn't look it up exactly, 140 years probably grandpa. And but if your grandpa was taken captive by another country and a slave, then you live later, no longer a slave, but you have enough trust and integrity that the leader of the other country that took your grandpa slave puts full trust in you, and you live that out. And yet your cry is for the glory and honor and beauty of Jerusalem. And that cry that James was talking about, God, help me. And spending his resources and his influence to restore the beauty and glory of Jerusalem. That's a big, but to operate in your lane, in our lane, with extreme trust, even if it's not the people, I don't know, that's just an interesting dynamic. Extreme trust there in Nehemiah, and yet his cry was to God and to restore. I'm going to do a wacky one here, and then play a country song, okay? So this is Father's Day, and it's different. It's just different, okay? So the name of the song is Wood, and it's not a direct Father's Day song, but so I want you to hear a few things in it. So, he will keep taking rough edges off of us. Father is very patient. How many of you found Father to be patient and yet continuing to work in your life? Father keeps working. Seeing what the wood can become. I think as dads, we have to keep seeing what our children can be. But it's God that keeps seeing that in us. Vision for the end, just a unique song. It's a lot of Father's message. We are being worked on by Father even as we're fathering our children. But we do need to know the wood. And there's a phrase in there, the stronger the fiber, the better for the good. Sometimes as dads, when there's strong fiber in our children, we see it as kind of mixed. And there's just a lot of blessing and strength and strong fiber. But then there's also a phrase in there, put more shoulder to the plane. It's what fathering, you have to stay in it. You have to keep fathering. But I'm thankful that Father keeps fathering. I was going to just play this song. Little different song, so just receive the message.